Good afternoon, folks. Matt McQueenie, Mix Minus Podcast. It is February 5th, just after 2:30. It is Super Bowl Sunday. Many of us in America and beyond will be watching the festivities. What are there usually? 120, 130, 140, maybe less million people who watch. It's an absolutely astounding statistic when you take into consideration the amount of people in this country and how many have their TVs tuned to that very event and how many people have parties. So it's probably even more people watching the event than the TVs that are turned on, because we're kind of all sitting around at parties most of the time watching it. I will not be having a party tonight. I have a 2.5-year-old. Well, he's 2 1/4 now. He's got to go to bed sometime in the middle of the Super Bowl, so we'll probably be pausing that. And usually you're okay with fast forwarding through commercials when you pause a game, but not for the Super Bowl. You want to see these commercials. I don't know. I've not been amazingly pumped up for this Super Bowl. I don't know if it's the election. There's just been, I did an episode a while ago called Malaise. There's kind of been a little bit of a malaise around things going on. There's things much bigger going on than sports. So sometimes when you put sports on, even though that's supposed to be your diversion, even though that's supposed to be your form of escapism, it's very hard to turn it on and take it seriously all the time when you have executive orders keeping people from coming into the country who had been coming into the country somewhat lawfully for many years. It's hard. It's like, it's almost like politics has turned into what sports was, with all the rumors and the trade, and the trades put out there and all this kind of, and the gossip and all this, like sports has almost become the stabilizing force. In the past, when you talk about government, it pretty much is taken off on the weekend. And then there's very defined times during the week when you're going to catch up with it. It's a constant crazy churn right now with the things going on, the motion that is being put in place by the administration right now, the seeming singular force of Donald Trump tweeting at people. He's everywhere. I mean, he's signing executive orders as quickly as he usually tweets. I mean, it's out of control. Although many who voted, I'm getting the sense, don't think it's out of control, because this is what they sent him to do. They sent that Molotov cocktail in there, and a Molotov cocktail usually blows up. So he's doing what he wants to do. He's doing what he feels like he had the mandate to do from his voters. It's absolutely horrifying me, I'll tell you that much. Whether you're liberal, conservative, I don't know. To me, it's horrifying me. It's unbelievable what's going on. But it's been very difficult to lock into sports. And I don't know if it's just that. I don't know, for instance, if the Giants kept moving along in the playoffs, I'm sure that I'd be just as locked into the playoffs as ever. But it's going to be the Atlanta Falcons playing the New England Patriots. The New England Patriots are in their 7th Super Bowl now. Oh my God. They could be going for their 5th win. It's pretty unbelievable when you think about it. And when you look at this game, I don't have an amazing feel on who could win. I think sometimes when you have teams playing each other in the playoffs, when you're going up through the conferences, right? They're sort of in a vacuum. It's like A/B testing. Like what's going on in one conference has nothing really to do with what's going on in the other. So once you hit that Super Bowl, you really don't have an amazing feel for who could win. The games tend to be close when when you're pitted with really good teams who you expect to play here. They tend to be obviously really intense with the amount of eyes on it, but they tend to be lower scoring as well. There's a very high scoring expectation on this game, something like 60 points or so. I don't know if it's going to do that, but the hard part I have here, so we saw last year, for instance, that the Carolina Panthers just bulldozed through the NFC, bulldozed through. Destroyed good teams. And then they got to the Super Bowl and they were playing Peyton Manning and the Denver Broncos, really the Denver Broncos defense with Peyton Manning in a supporting role, and they were just clocked. So when you saw the 2 playoff runs, we thought obviously the defense of Denver was going to be formidable, more than formidable. I mean, they were fantastic. And many times you see this happen where a front seven is so good, and their secondary is great as well, but it's so good that it takes the game over the way that a running back or a running game can take a game over and control the ball at the line of scrimmage. And their defense did that. So once that happened, you're sitting there going, well, what the heck happened in the month that the Panthers were playing other NFC teams? Now, the Panthers were home on that run. There were many factors that would lead being a 15-1 team at the end of the season. Many factors would lead you to think this is going to be their coronation. This is going to be the final path on the way towards a great story, but it doesn't necessarily always happen that way. And so that's the only thing giving me pause about this game is that Atlanta was very similar. They're in the same division as Carolina. They ended up with home field advantage because Dallas lost to Green Bay in the second round, and they were able to run up the score and do really well and look really dominating. But now they're going to be walking in to the game here in Houston at Energy Stadium, and they're going to be playing the Patriots, who, when you look at it, they don't necessarily, you really don't know what the Patriots are. They have a lot of legacy going to them. You trust Tom Brady, although he's 39 years old. They still have Edelman, and they have nice players up and down the field, but you think about the fact they traded one of their best players, their defensive players, this year, Jamie Collins, and they did fine. Like, nothing seems to get to them. So legacy versus the hot hand is kind of the deal here. The great offense, the prolific scoring offense. Kyle Shanahan running the offensive side, Dan Quinn running the team and the defensive side. Dan Quinn beat these, he didn't beat them. He beat the Broncos when he was the defensive coordinator of Seattle. But when he was with Seattle when they lost on that unbelievable final play that they should have handed it off to Marshawn Lynch. As many people look back and just, oh God, I couldn't imagine losing that game, being a team like that. At least they had the win the year before to hang their hat on. But you look at this game and you just say to yourself, the legacy of the Patriots, is it going to be formidable enough? Do they have enough players playing to this program with the known factor that we do know? I mean, we know that Belichick is going to game plan as well as you possibly can. But does the legacy and the Brady factor and just their being there 7 times now, how does that match up against the team that's got the hot hand, who's on fire, who has the story, who comes in with the MVP, much as Carolina did last year? I don't know. Sometimes, though, you get that feeling early on. They get punched in the mouth, and it can really set them back. It's like that term, they have a glass jaw. They get punched in the mouth, and it's over. Or as I talked about in a previous podcast where Mike Tyson would say, everybody has a plan until they're punched in the mouth. So we'll see what they do there. I know for me, when I look at it, and there's no analysis in this thought or anything like that, I'm kind of rooting for the Patriots to win. And why do you say that? It's because I kind of want to maintain the legacy of the New York Giants of the last 9 or 10 years, being the only team to roll into the Super Bowl and play the New England Patriots and beat them. In both times they played them, in the 2007 season, so it was in 2008, and then in the 2011 season, which was in February of 2012. I mean, that's just something, I'd love that legacy to maintain right there. I would just love that to happen. If Atlanta comes in and beats them, now it diminishes a little bit from the Giants. It really doesn't. You still have your Super Bowls. That is the immortalizing factor you always want to have there, but it would take away. So I kind of selfishly want to see that happen, but Atlanta does have a lot of skill players, a lot of tools there, and they tend to get into high-scoring games, though, so we'll see about that. Brought up the Giants, though. It's kind of funny. You get to Super Bowl, and if you have a team you follow, and they've been out of the game for many years. I mean, they haven't been out of the game for as long as many fan bases, and the Giants obviously have won 2 in the last 9 years. So that is unbelievably impressive. I'm not taking away from that. But you get to this Super Bowl day, and you kind of want to kindle those feelings you have when the team you're rooting for is in it. And so I was looking on my iPad. I looked on YouTube, and I was looking for I was first just going to look at highlights of the 2007 Super Bowl, I just wanted to see some highlights. And then I realized, oh, they have the full game. They have the full game, and they cut out all commercials, and they kind of cut out certain changeovers from offense to defense, things like that. So it's a real crisp 2 hours and 10 minutes. And I fired that up, and I just started playing it. And it was amazing to watch this from 9 years ago. 9 years ago. I had just gotten back in real time. I had just gotten back from my first long road trip covering the New Jersey Nets. It was I think it was a 10 or a 12-day road trip that took me through all kinds of parts of the United States. The trip went from Phoenix to LA, or LA to Phoenix to Sacramento to San Francisco, aka Golden State, to Denver to Minnesota. And I remember watching the Giants game, the NFC Championship game, the freezing game where all the rosacea on Tom Coughlin's cheeks came out. I remember watching that game from the press box in Phoenix. Was it called America West Arena at the time? I think it was the name of the... that's how I always remember it. America West. Same thing with the baseball stadium there. To me, it's always the Bob. It's Bank One Ballpark. It's funny how it's two Arizona teams where that has happened. And then their football stadium is called the University of Phoenix Stadium, which is such a strange name. And it's the place where the Giants went on to win, truth be told. But I remember watching that NFC Championship game in the press box as the Nets were playing the Suns. And I remember being like, wow, I'm in Phoenix. It's really warm. And you're watching this game where the Giants are in the frigid north, sub-zero temperatures, negative temperatures. And I remember them getting that win and then going back on the bus from the game to the arena. And I was going back with the other announcers and broadcasters and media members who are within the team, PR people, things like that. And just the joy going on in that bus. And I remember there I said, oh, the headline's going to be three times the charm for the 3 field goals or attempts and then ultimately the make that Lawrence Tynes had to hit. And they loved that. That was a lot of fun. But then I remember getting back because obviously you have 2 weeks between that championship game and the ultimate championship game, the Super Bowl. And so in that time I got back home. And then I remember going to see the Super Bowl at my to-be wife Melanie's mom's house. And just the pure joy in that game. I just remember watching it and just being utterly shocked by what I was seeing. The fact that the Giants were going toe-to-toe with this historically dominant, undefeated to that point, New England Patriots team. It was just... you couldn't believe what you were watching. And then when it got down towards the end, you were like, they got to get out of here with a win. There's no moral victories here. They got to close this. And then once you got your investment into the game where you thought they could win it, then Tom Brady hits Randy Moss for the touchdown. They go up 14-10, the Patriots, that is, after the Giants at 11 minutes and 5 seconds in the fourth had hit, Eli had hit David Tyree with the touchdown in the end zone. And you're like, after they hadn't scored since the very beginning of the game, both teams, I think they scored on the first two passes in the first two series of the game. They hadn't scored since then until the break in that fourth. And it kind of opened it up and you go, ooh, this could happen. The Giants could play this. It's kind of the type of game that the Giants teams of this year, the Giants team of this year won a lot of the games. Those close to the vest, low scoring games, defensive dominance. Eli makes a play when he needs to, moves a runner along in the baseball parlance. But it was something. And then I just remember the pure joy of seeing that win. I mean, an improbable Super Bowl win, an improbable upset. And then I remember just being pumped up, getting in my car and driving the hour ride home because my wife and I were sort of long distance at the time, me and Mawa, her out there in Byram out in Sussex County. And I'd listen to NFL radio the whole way home, all the interviews, and it was just amazing. But today I wanted to fire up that game and I wanted to watch it because it's Super Bowl day and I wanted to rekindle those feelings. And even knowing the outcome of the game, I watched it with such a sense at the final point of the game of dread, because after Brady hits Moss for that touchdown, Eli has about 2 minutes and 40 seconds at that point to go what would ultimately be 83 yards because Dominic Hickson had caught the kickoff and was just drilled by the special teams player, and so the Giants had to go a little extra even than being around the 20. And just the play was unbelievable. And then watching that final series, you forget. I mean, gosh, it felt like Eli Manning threw 6 near interceptions. I mean, everyone will say, hey, what's new? That's Eli. He kind of flings it up there, and there's some kind of serendipity to his game because the balls that would be intercepted by most quarterbacks, he gets away with. He gets drops on the defensive point of view. But there were like 6 interceptions. To go those 83 yards in 2 minutes was just absolutely unreal. And it was funny because I say in the game at the 11:05 mark when he hit Tyree for that touchdown, it was funny because Tyree was not really much of a receiver threat. And then in this fourth quarter of this game in 2007, in February of 2008 that is, and him to make such big plays at that point. It was once he had that touchdown, Joe Buck, when they came back from the timeout on the kickoff, he said, David Tyree with the biggest catch of his life. And you're sitting there going, oh man, with what I know, and you got the helmet catch still coming. I mean, it was just such an amazing feeling to watch that. But to have Eli take that ball over with 80 plus yards to go and 2.5 minutes in the Super Bowl when he's 27 and you hadn't quite gotten the mythology of Eli yet, it was tough to take. Although it was funny, there was a play in the first quarter where he winged it up a la Manningham in the 2012 Super Bowl. Or the 2011 season, 2012 Super Bowl. It's the hardest thing with that turnover of the year. But he whipped one up, and Amani Toomer, remember that name, his final game there, as it was Michael Strahan's. Amani Toomer catches the ball as his feet tiptoe out of bounds and he falls down. I mean, it was as good an Eli playoff throw as there was, but it was early in the game. And then it ultimately led, there was an interception off of Steve Smith's hands. Remember him? He was really big in this game too. But it was such a cool game. And just to watch it again and to see the utter joy and to see what the game meant to Coughlin's career as things were happening, to see Belichick think he had it in the bag with 2.5 minutes to go. I mean, I'm not going to say he definitely felt that deep down, but I don't think people were that afraid of the Giants team. I don't think they were that afraid of Eli. And what he's been able to do against the Patriots has just been unbelievable. The other thing with that season, they were 14-6 at the end of the day, right? They finished 10-6 on the season and then ran the table, having to play in the first round where they played in Tampa. Second round, they went to Dallas. Third round, they went to Green Bay. And then they moved on down to Phoenix to play the Super Bowl. But they were 14-6. They won 11 of the games that season away from home on the road. I mean, that is just unreal. That was the season they started 0-2 and were down in the third game at Washington. So it was great. But with Tyree, the other funny thing is, the other point I wanted to make there, kind of history makes you feel that he was this sort of insignificant player. And yes, offensively he sort of was, other than having this magical quarter where he caught the touchdown and caught the crazy catch on his helmet. But he was a Pro Bowler. He was a special teams extraordinaire player. I mean, he was unbelievable on special teams, so much so they made the Pro Bowl in 2005. So he was a good player. He also was born in Livingston and grew up in Montclair, another close by guy. And he's a player development guy with the Giants now. But you see that moment, and he really was a great player. And then I think of Dwayne Jackson, who's on the team now, who sort of has a lot of magical plays, especially last year, not this year. He was really good as a offensive threat, as like a tertiary offensive threat. But yeah, it was great to watch it. And just seeing that play in real time, where Eli is pretty much about to be taken down by 3 Patriots on third down, breaks out, just Sandlot, shrugs off his shoulders and then just chucks it deep the way Eli does, where he throws his whole body into it. And then for the catch, to see it in real time, for Tyree to come down with the ball against his helmet, it was unreal to watch. It was just a lot of fun. But it comes down to the point, that is why I'm kind of rooting for the Patriots here. Let's see if they can get their 5th Super Bowl in 7 tries over, what are we looking at, 15 years now or so? Oh, they've been in the Super Bowl once every 2 years. I mean, that is a dominant run. I mean, I think about Bill Simmons. How about him with the Red Sox? How about him with the Celtics? How about him with the Patriots? I mean, I don't know if the Bruins have even won some, although he's become a Kings fan. But yeah, it's great. So I really watched that. Maybe I'll wait to watch the 2012 one till a future Super Bowl year, maybe next year where the Giants aren't in it. But it was funny because one of my friends, Andrew Pangert, who's probably hearing this, he's been on the podcast. Haven't heard from him in a long time. And he sent a group text to me and Matt O'Daniels, who's also on the podcast a lot. And it was the play where James Harrison had that amazing play where he ran it back for a touchdown because the Steelers are Pangert's team. And I was thinking to myself, isn't this funny that a bunch of us are forlornly watching our team's best moments in the Super Bowl on the day they're not there? Is that because this is sort of an unassuming Super Bowl, doesn't have a lot of sizzle appeal? Even though you look at it and you go, oh, great offense, but it's Atlanta and then playing the old faithful Patriots, but it just doesn't have that feel. And again, maybe it's because of what's going on politically, although I do believe a lot of NFL fans are probably more towards Trump than they are towards Hillary and liberal. But yeah, it was, I don't know. I guess a lot of us are doing that, but it's been hard for me. And the other reason it's been hard for me, I've been on a tear watching Oscar movies. The Oscar podcast with Tim Castano and Jamie Alfano Mulhern will be taking place. It will be recorded next weekend. Again, today's February 5th, so it'll be next weekend. I believe it'll be Sunday, but it could be Saturday. So that will be getting released with 2 weeks before the Oscars. I like to give it some breathing room up to the Oscars. But I've been on a tear seeing the movies. I was watching some of the movies before the Oscars were nominated, but there's a part of you that doesn't want to go all in because you waste a lot on movies and then maybe they're not even in play. Like Sully was one I saw like that I don't even think is really in play for anything, even though it was a decent movie. But I've been watching at least one a day. Some weekends I'm clearing 4 or 5 because I got about 4 more, I think. 4 or 5 legitimately more movies I have to watch that are true Oscar contenders. But I'll just go through some of the ones I saw. I saw Manchester by the Sea. This is going to probably be a Best Actor category for Casey Affleck. It was a good movie. The problem that I had with this movie was that I saw it too close after seeing Gleason, the documentary about Steve Gleason, which I talked about in a previous podcast. That thing was so emotionally wrought and so real and so fathers and sons and learning and love and all this. And it was so real that I was affected for a week. And I happened to see Manchester by the Sea during this week. And no matter how sad the theme of this movie is, what the plot was, it doesn't hold a candle to the reality of Steve Gleason. So I think this movie kind of paid for that, but it was a good movie. It was a really well done movie. Michelle Williams is really good in it. Casey Affleck is great. And the cool thing with this movie, this was a Kenneth Lonergan movie. And I read an article about Kenneth Lonergan in the New Yorker, really good one. He had made a movie called Margaret or Maggie, something like that. I think it's Margaret. And it was a movie that was coming on the heels of a bunch of kind of indie hits he had. And it was his big budget movie, and he kind of got into a spat with the production company and about the ending and about the length of the movie, and the thing went on for years and years and years and years, and he lost a lot of esteem, I think, in the industry because he had his big shot and he kind of became a malcontent. And nobody who's in the money-making business wants malcontents or wants people who are going to put up speed bumps on their way to making more and more money. So he was kind of blackballed a little bit. And this Manchester by the Sea, I believe, was supposed to be directed by Matt Damon, but he gave it to his friend Kenneth Lonergan. This is for you. So in many ways, this movie, the sadness you feel in it, there's a real reason for the sadness, which I don't want to tell you what it is because it would kind of wreck the experience of watching the movie until you get that reveal. But the sadness of the movie is kind of intertwined with the comeback and sadness of what happened with Kenneth Lonergan's career. And there's actually a point where Casey Affleck gets into a fight with someone who's walking on the street. Sort of the mano a mano thing where someone bumps you or something and they don't say sorry. And so you're like, hey, F you, man, and all this. And I think the guy who he bumped in the street was Kenneth Lonergan. So not only is Kenneth Lonergan disseminating this feeling in this movie, but he puts himself out there to be scorned against. So it was a really good movie. And you come onto the scene with this Casey Affleck character. His name is Lee Chandler. And he just seems dead inside. He's just he's a a handyman, a repairman for apartment buildings, and he just seems dead inside. There's nothing to him. And what the movie does as it kind of goes along is it does these flashbacks to these moments 8-10 years ago where you see a different version of this guy, of this Casey Affleck character, a happier version. And then you get all these little reveals along the way leading up to the moment where you see why he is who he is. And so once you see that, it kind of makes you see the movie a different way. You go, oh, I see that. I could understand that. Especially being a parent, I could understand why what happened, why his actions are what they are. And I would probably be in a similar spot. But the movie is about his older brother, Lee Chandler, the character, the Casey Affleck character, Lee Chandler, his older brother, who's a Chandler and is played by Kyle Chandler, the coach from the Friday Night Lights television show, which is kind of funny to have the same last name. But he passes on from some defect he has, I think a heart defect of some sort, maybe heart disease. And the thought was he would pass. And you see that in the flashback too, where he's told that he has this disease that he's going to have to deal with. And he passes and he has a 17-year-old son. And Lee Chandler, the guy who is the main character, the Casey Affleck character, he is, in the will, he is made the guardian of his older brother's son, the 17-year-old son. And the son plays a really good part in this movie. The weird thing in this is the son, the way he talks about sex with, being like a teenager, and he's so mature about it and so rational about it. That part felt weird to me. And they're so open about it, and kids aren't really like that. So I don't know, but that was really good. Really annoying thing in that movie that had nothing to do with the movie. I went to see it in Succasunna, which is a great name for a town, which is out here where I live on the other side of Route 80. It's sort of by Roxbury. And we went to this movie there. From the theater is called Cinépolis, and it has like the Accent Aigu on it. I don't know what that deal is. It's like a European company who bought some of these theaters. And my mom, because I went with my mom and my dad, I met them out there. We went to see it, and she got a big popcorn. I got to stay away from popcorn. I eat so well. I'm such a baby with my gums that I'm eating this popcorn. Maybe it was the butter, the grease, whatever it is. Maybe it just got caught, but I got like a kernel caught in my tooth. And it's like I'm getting an infection in my gum. I'm still pulling out pieces, and I'm good with my teeth. I brush my teeth, I floss, I do everything every day. But man, popcorn is insidious. It makes you pay for being a healthy food. And it doesn't make any sense as a food when you think about it. Like, can't they just give you popcorn that doesn't just have all the kernels hanging around? Especially when it's in a bag, a bag you buy at the store or even at a movie theater. Like, find a way to get the kernels out of there. Make some kind of system where the popcorn is held, that there's a strainer that only allows tiny kernels to be discarded, because it's the most insane food. You're breaking your teeth in the dark. I got these infections in my gum for like weeks later. 4 days later, I finally got the piece out and the pain was gone. But I'm like dealing with this terrible pain in my teeth from the goddamn popcorn. Another movie I saw, a documentary, Weiner. It was when Anthony Weiner was running for mayor of New York. Such a good behind the scenes documentary. I don't know why he opened himself to do it when he knew more reveals that were coming about his his sexual peccadillos online, his sexting and all that stuff. He wasn't even going out with women. He was doing this all through photo apps and all that kind of stuff and messaging services. Just a weird guy that way. And it's a shame because he really comes across as a guy who's a great legislator and a great politician who means well, who froths at the mouth like a dog when there's something that he feels a wrong is being done to his constituents. I mean, he's a real politician, but he has this weird way to let out the steam, and it's this sexting thing that is just out of control. And Uma Abedin, who was the main person for Hillary Clinton all these years, and then into her campaign, and she's his wife in this. They've since separated, but she's so supportive. But then all these reveals come out, and you're just like, oh, how does she deal with this? And how is he having these meetings with his staff and her there, where he's talking about his sexting? I wouldn't even call them conquests, just his these things he does. But it was a really good movie to watch, or documentary. You can get it on Showtime. Very nice. As I said, I saw Sully. It was interesting to see that again. I can't believe it's been has it been 8 years, I think, since it was January 15th. But I don't remember. I think it's been 8 years because I think it was January 15th of 2008. But Tom Hanks is really good in it. Aaron Eckhart. Tom Hanks plays Sully. And then Aaron Eckhart plays his second in command on that plane. But it was just amazing to watch that. And one thing that was tough with that movie was when he's having bad dreams. When he's and you don't know they're bad dreams, but he's having bad dreams in the movie. And in the bad dream, it's like the plane is crashing into Manhattan and blowing up. That was a really, really tough thing to watch. Obviously, being around 9/11, just the effect of that. And Clint Eastwood directed this movie. I don't know if he gave enough credence to our feeling on that about maybe not having that happen, maybe have it hit somewhere else. It was just really hard to watch. It was jarring, to be honest. But I lived in Edgewater at the time, and I think I was in my apartment. I didn't even realize this happened, or maybe I'd left early, but that would have flown like literally, because I was right near the George Washington Bridge, right on the water there on the New Jersey side. And that thing flew right there. I mean, that was pretty amazing when that happened, and that nobody died. Everyone survived. But the crux of the story where it really kicks into play, and I didn't realize this, when he had to go before the National Transportation Safety Board to justify his decision to do what he did, because if you think about it, he's ruined like a ridiculously expensive piece of hardware in a plane. I mean, he's ruined it. Like, what can you do with that plane now? It's gone. So the airlines are like, well, this sucks. They probably want insurance to pay somehow, but that payout can probably only happen if a certain eventuality is deduced to have happened. And in this, it's almost in a courtroom setting in a way where he and his second in command are on the bench or whatever. They're kind of before the safety board having to explain themselves. And the safety board is like, you could have turned around and landed back at LaGuardia. You could have gone to Teterboro. You could have gone to Newark Airport. We have these simulations that say that you could have done this. And they had the simulations. They watched them. They're in the courtroom and they do land it. And then he said, well, yeah, but people know that that's what they were going to have to do. Now give it 20 seconds where they're having to figure out everything in real time because these geese fly in, you don't know what you're going to do. And when they add the 20 seconds, it doesn't work out. You couldn't have gotten back. So it was a real, it was a real moment that you felt redemption for Sully when you get to that part. But it was a decent movie, not a great movie. And that's once you saw the nominations, you saw maybe why that was the case. But a decent movie, especially if you want to get deeper into what happened there. But it was hard to watch again, those crashes in New York. We saw the Girl on the Train movie, Melanie and I. I did not read the book. It was a kind of strange movie. I don't even know really how to explain it quickly, but Justin Theroux kind of plays the philandering male presence, and Emily Blunt plays his former wife, whose life is turned upside down because he makes her feel crazy because he's sort of cheating on her. He sets her up. He's sort of abusive. He ultimately proves her right. He leaves with the realtor, has a baby with the realtor, I think moves into the house that he and Emily Blunt were in, and then moves her, she has to move out. And then you find out that Justin Theroux is seeing more women on the side. He's moving in women to live in a couple of houses down. Someone's murdered, and then the whole story has to come together. It was a weird movie, and it probably was very true to the book, I'm sure. But you find that with some of these novels that are very that have a lot of crime in them and have to stay alluring for people, they get difficult to watch when they're movies. I thought, what was the movie with the girl, Gone Girl? I thought that did it really well as you can do it with kind of these crazy storylines. Girl on the Train was lacking there, but you can rent it. I did it with some rental where you could get it for 99 cents. That was okay. Florence Foster Jenkins, which has a Best Actress nominee for Meryl Streep. That was an interesting movie. That was like Florence Foster Jenkins was this kind of rich heiress who was really into the arts and backed the arts. But part of the deal was She wanted to be one with the arts. She loved singing and playing music, and she was a horrendous singer. But her husband, who's played by Hugh Grant in this, wants to make her feel like a star because of all she does for people and what a nice person she is. So he's able to kind of stack the deck at these events where everybody who goes to it understands that she's the worst singer in the world, and that they're sort of all in on the joke. Instead of getting tickets, they get paid with tickets to go see it. And they're all great. And they give her standing ovations as if you would never think she wasn't the best singer in the world. And then it comes to this point where she's going to perform, I think, at Carnegie Hall or something like that. And so you can't control who comes in. And so sailors are there, everything. And they're just laughing at her, and it's terrible. And so it was just a moment where it's just this crazy story. You just never think that this kind of thing can happen. But I guess in the 40s, 50s, these kind of things can happen. But Hugh Grant was very good. The loving husband, he marries her. She's considerably older than him. She had syphilis and she was like 20 years old, this woman, because the first man she had married had it and didn't tell her and gave it to her. So she lived with that disease for her whole life. It was a weird movie, but Meryl Streep was quite good in it, as she always is. The guy who plays her pianist, who has to audition to be in that role, he's really good. He's just this funny kid who isn't understanding what the whole game is, and so at first he's kind of standoffish about wanting to play with her at like Carnegie Hall or at these events, because he's like he's telling this to the Hugh Grant, out of her ear sight, or out of her listening. Why did I say ear sight? He's saying to Hugh Grant, like, I don't know, my reputation's on the line. Hugh Grant's like, your reputation? What is your reputation? Do we not pay you well? And it's funny because her singing coach is this famous singing coach who's with all the best singers around the world. And when Hugh Grant says to him, I'd like you to be there at our concert, and the singing coach is like, well, I'm going to be in Florida, I think, pretty soon. You'll have to let me know the date. And Hugh Grant goes, well, why don't you tell me the date you're in Florida? He's like, oh, I'm not too sure. Just let me know the date of the other one. Like all these people, it's sort of how it is with sycophants, right? Or people who are aligned like a posse with big money and greatness. Well, not big greatness. It's more big money, and they're aligned with this, and they're all in when their reputation's not out there, when they're getting the money from the whole thing. And then the minute their reputation could be put in front of an audience, or others can see what they do and what they align with, and it would take their quality down because people would go, oh my God, how can you be with this person? Then they're gone. It's sort of funny like that. I saw Fences, which was really good. That's an Oscar finalist, I believe, for Best Picture, and Denzel Washington's in it, and Viola Davis, and it's just this story. It's a old famous, what's his name, August Williams? It's a famous play on Broadway that was turned into a movie, and Denzel Washington plays this former baseball player who was sort of past the color divide time. So he came of age as this great player before he was really allowed to play and make any money off of it and really be involved in the game at any level. And when you meet him, he's about 53. He's a garbage man. He's married to Viola Davis. And the whole first 45 minutes or so is just this fast talking between he and his best friend, who is, I forget the guy's name, but you would know him if you saw him, an African-American actor, older guy, short guy, really round, and he's great in it. And the whole movie sort of feels silly for a while. It feels like a play and all this, and then the boom just drops on the movie when Denzel Washington walks in to tell Viola Davis something after 18 years of marriage. And from that point on, it is just engrossing. The movie just locks you in with the psychological ramifications, the emotional ramifications of that piece of information, and then all the things that happen as things continue to move. Oh my God. So I would absolutely see that. That was great. I saw Jackie. Natalie Portman was so good. Jackie was probably one of my favorite movies that I've seen to date. It was about the week after JFK was unfortunately assassinated, and the immediate aftermath of it happening what Jackie Kennedy was doing in the moment, why she left that same dress on that she was wearing when it happened, so the monsters could see the blood on her clothes. Just the aspect of putting the state funeral together and upping the ante because she wanted him to be seen as the great man that she felt he was in the public, even with what he was doing to her behind the scenes with the philandering and all that. She wanted his procession to be as big as Abraham Lincoln, and there's this palpable fear in the moment of a president's just been assassinated. We can't have heads of state, ambassadors, the incoming president, we can't have them walking down Pennsylvania Avenue with a hearse. So it's deep, it's good, and Natalie Portman she plays such a great role in this movie. I was engrossed, and the way it's shot, it's right up in their face. It's like so documentary level, and the way that the story is kind of. The through line is a journalist coming up to Hyannisport to do a feature on her after the death of JFK. So she's sort of telling the story, and there's flashbacks to their history. Amazing, they were only in the White House for like 2 years. What a run for a guy to be in there for 2 years and to have as much ink written about him and movies and all this. And it was because there was Camelot. And this whole story was kind of where Camelot was constructed and where it was created. It was in this story, actually, where she ties that whole story together that we come to believe in. I was actually thinking maybe Trump will be the guy who has more written about him and more movies and documentaries if he lasts the 2 years. He might give JFK a run. And I'm not saying because of assassination. It could be impeachment. It could be any number of things, but Jackie was just so good. It was so amazing. The moments where she has to tell her kids that their father has been killed, and they're these little kids dealing with the Johnson administration who rightfully want to take over the Oval Office and the White House because they want to get to business. The world is in the feeling of the world is in shambles in the country, and how Jackie is trying to get the ultimate burial place for JFK, and how they inter the other kids who died and bring them to that spot. It was just so good, and Natalie Portman was so amazing. I can't recommend that enough. I saw Life Animated, which is about Ron Suskind, who's a prominent writer, mostly on politics. I read a book of his called Confidence Men, and it was about the early Obama presidency and all the people he brought in kind of from Wall Street and all this who were there in the con point of view of confidence in a way, who were trying to maneuver a new green president into certain policies and moving them along quickly. It was a pretty good book. It was weird to read kind of a negative feel of Obama early on, but it was a good book. Well, his son, Owen Suskind, I think that was his name, right? He had not Alzheimer's. He has autism. At about 3 years old, the light went out, as they say in the movie, and they can't get to him. It's like a year. He's stuck in there. He's not the kid he was. He's really not going to be very involved in life in many ways. He's not going to have many of his faculties about him. And then what they find is that he just watches Disney movies. It's the one thing that kind of keeps him grounded, is watching these Disney movies. And then over time, they figure that the Disney movies can kind of open him up to the world. He can model how behavior should be, how you should behave. He can model conversation. He can model read and react in moments. He can do it all through Disney movies. And through this, they find their son again. Now, he obviously has autism. It's an intense thing. It's crazy to see him in the home he's in until he can graduate out of that at 18 and move into a little apartment. It's difficult, obviously. But the moment you see where the light turns back on through Disney is amazing. And so the documentary kind of follows their family through this progression and process, and how they got to the other side of this, and how they still struggle, but they're much better off. And the weirdness of it coming through Disney movies. He could pretty much memorize all the dialogue, all the storylines in these Disney movies, and that was how they found him. I mean, it was fascinating. Moonlight is a real good movie. It's a coming of age story about a young black kid in Miami, and just dealing with not only coming of age and kind of a bad part of the of the country in a bad neighborhood with drugs and all this, but coming of age with sexuality. He's a gay kid basically in the black culture, which is very against that. And he kind of finds a little bit of a soulmate and a friend, and they have a moment. And then when others in the high school, want that friend of his to prove his manhood, and they beat this kid, they beat him to a pulp. There's a lot of fraught anxieties in this movie. It's a strange coming of age kind of story like that. But the real neat thing with it is it goes at 3 different levels of his life, from when he's a little kid to when he's in high school to when he's like 30 years old, 28, 30 years old. So it's 3 different actors playing him along the way. And it was just really good. Mahershala Ali, I think his name is. He's the guy, Remy Danton from House of Cards. He's also in Luke Cage. I've yet to see that yet. I want to see that. But he is fantastic in this. He was also in Hidden Figures. He was the husband. He was the guy who married the one of the main characters in that movie. It's funny how a lot of these actors come into play in one season for the Oscars. Like, I've often wondered, do they decide to film a lot of movies one year and then take off 2 years and then film a lot of movies? Because you see this a lot where they're coming in and out of different movies. But Moonlight was quite good. I jokingly, and I go, this is not to undermine the movie, this is just a pure joke. I was kind of calling this Broke Black Mountain. It's poverty, it's African American, and it has the sexuality undertones of coming of age with homosexuality. So I know many could think that's not funny. I don't know. But I saw Lion as well yesterday. I went to Persephone Theaters to see that. That was also cool because that was another one like Moonlight where you have an actor playing the main character at a young age, and then you have the actor played by Dev Patel at an older age. And what Lion comes down to, I didn't know this movie. I didn't know the story behind this going in. But it's 2 brothers and a family from a really poor village in India, on the outskirts of India, like the way northwest of India. And they need to make ends meet, the kids. So they'll do things that are maybe somewhat stretching the law, but it's how you got to do it. It's not quite illegal, but it's doing what you can for your family, illiterate family, poor, living in very ramshackle existence. And one night, the older brother says he's going out to continue to do this, and this younger kid, who I would say is probably 6 or 7 at the time, maybe even 5, he says, no, I want to go with you. And he said, you're too young. He keeps telling him he's too young. And he through just pushing along. And this young actor is so good. The kid who plays the young, his name is Saru. In this movie, he's such a good actor, this little kid. And he ultimately convinces his older brother to allow him to go. So they do go. They take a couple trains, and then they got to go about their way. And Saru's like, I'm so tired, I want to go to bed. And the brother's all pissed. He's like, you said you were going to come out. This isn't right. Well, you stay right here. So he lets the little kid sleep on a bench. And then the kid wakes up, an hour, 2 hours later, and his brother isn't there anymore because he's out doing what he had to do. And then he goes looking for him. He goes on a train looking for him, and it's a decommissioned train in the middle of the night. And then he just kind of sits down, and he's like, I'll just wait for him, and falls asleep and wakes up, and the train is in motion. This decommissioned train apparently goes something like 1,700 kilometers, which I don't know what that means in our miles, but it's over 1,000. It's probably closer to 1,500 maybe. And he's just way gone. A 7-year-old kid from a little village in India ends up in Calcutta in West Bengal. Totally different culture, totally different language, hustle bustle of a large city, totally just overwhelming. And you're just getting like a panic attack. And what happens is this kid can't explain himself. He doesn't know the true name of his village. He can't speak the language. He kind of gets in with these other kids, and then men are chasing them, trying to corral them. He gets in with a woman who tries to appear as if she's going to be nice to him and do well for him, but then it turns into some weird thing where a guy shows up and it looks like they're going to try to proposition him for other men or something like that, sexually. Weird stuff. So he runs away. He ends up in a children's home, and then ends up being adopted by a couple. The woman is Nicole Kidman in the movie, adopted by a couple in Australia, ends up in Australia. 20 some odd years later, he grows up to be a great kid. He's in his late 20s, probably close to 30, and he decides, I need to find my family, because he's been ripped from his family in an awful situation. And then the story over the next 5 years or so is trying to find a way, almost the way Carrie Mathison on Homeland tries to do like a criminal thing with the black, with the board and the pins and putting the pictures up and all this. And he uses Google Earth to try to find this village. And it's not happening. It's very hard because he doesn't even have the right name of the village. He can't remember certain key things about it. Hey, 1,700 kilometers can go any which way. It's such a difficult thing to figure out. And ultimately, you reach the end, and then there is, I'll leave that to you. But what a phenomenal movie. But it was sort of similar in that where Moonlight, where you have the different actors at the different levels. And I thought the kid actor in Lion was fantastic. Dev Patel's great. He was good in Newsroom. He was good wasn't he Slumdog Millionaire, I think. He's been in some things. He was good. And Rooney Mara plays his girlfriend, his adult girlfriend in this one, which was good. I talked about Hidden Figures. I had no idea about this history. 3 African-American women in the midst of the 1960s racist society end up being integral players in the space race. And I'm watching this movie. They work at NASA, down there in Florida. And one is an engineer, one is a mathematician, one deals with the IBM business machines in their very early incarnations, and she's able to figure it out with the flashcards and all this kind of stuff. But it was just amazing. And it's amazing when you're watching this movie, when you think about the fact that with the computing power they had, which was mostly just manpower, the computers were, what do they say? Like our current iPhones are like like 1,000 times. They have 1,000 times more computing power than the original computers that were happening in like the 1960s. And these things were used to send guys to the moon, to send people into space, and with the crazy gravitational pulls and all that stuff. I mean, it blows my mind we sent people to space in the capsules we did, and that they make it on re-entry and they get back and they land in the ocean, and where are they going to land? And you got to use hypotenuses and all this stuff to figure that out. I mean, it blows your mind. And the other thing I thought about this movie was, boy, we don't have something today that unites all Americans. The space race united all Americans at a time where it was almost a sport to go against other countries. Who was going to be the first to space? Who was going to be the first to the moon? And it was an organizing principle that all Americans could get behind. And we don't have that today. We don't have anything that unites us like that. And that was kind of a sad thought there. It was very tough. But a good movie nonetheless. Very interesting movie. Last one I'll talk about, I saw La La Land. I was not looking forward to seeing La La Land. All I heard was it was a musical. It's a little cheesy. And a part of me was just like, I don't want to see that. But it got like 14 nominations, so you got to see it. Anything that's in the Best Picture, if you're going to do an Oscar show or write about the Oscars or do whatever with the Oscars, that's something that you really want to... that's something that you really have to see. And so I just decided, all right, I bit the bullet. I took my son down to my in-laws, grandmother-in-law, aunt-in-law, and he was going to stay there. It's down by Little Falls. And then I went over to Wayne and saw the movie. And of course, right off the bat, it's a total musical. It's people in their cars in LA, and they're all jumping out of the car, doing all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm going to absolutely hate this. This is going to blow I can't take this. I can't. It just feels so cheesy. I feel so gross. And then I'm watching it, and you get past that. And yes, there is musical aspects all throughout the movie, but the actual movie part is way more, it's way more common. It's way more the normal parts that are not musical than the other parts. And you know what? Because they're in such nice dosage, because the percentage that the musical part is there is like, I'd say 75-25 probably, 25 musical. It sticks in your head, and you're like, why am I singing musical songs? And maybe that's the point. But the story is really good. People trying to make it in LA, one a musician, one an actress, and they kind of exalt each other to be better and better, and to make their dreams come true. And the one part from that movie, and we'll talk about it more in the Oscar podcast, but the scene where the Ryan Gosling character makes it. All he wants to be is a jazz musician. That's all he wants to be, a classical jazz musician. And he has connections to modern jazz, which brings in rock and it brings in 80s. And you got to do that kind of stuff. You got to create an alchemy that makes it modern, that brings a sound to the masses of the modern day. It's something you got to do. And so he kind of gives in with the pushing of the Emma Stone. She kind of pushes him to go into this. Because it's hard with jazz. A lot of people don't like jazz in the modern day, the way it was meant to be played in its original form. And so he goes into this. He ends up signing big deals with these guys. They're touring the country, all this. And there's one scene that really affected me. It got to me. It got to the crux of the male-female relationship when you're trying to come together, when maybe you're going to take that next step. And there's things tearing you apart. It's a lot of what you hear with actors and actresses when they meet in real life, when they meet on a movie set, and the love affair of being in the movie together. They're with each other all day. They can the love is just all ever present. And what happens is they're there, they have the moment, they'll stay together, maybe they get married, and then all of a sudden their next projects take them apart. And then once you're apart, what is there that's a commonality anymore? You could Skype, you could do all this, but you got to be together. I mean, that's the hardest part of it. I mean, we just saw that with Phil Jackson and Jeannie Buss. They were together forever. They were going to get married, I believe, and they call off the engagement because he's in New York, she's in LA, and they can't even talk to each other about their main things, which are their teams, because it would be kind of a form of collusion. You can't really do that. But there's a scene in this movie, La La Land, where he's made it and she hasn't seen him in a while, and then she comes home and you see that old scene where the table's made up and there's food there and everything, and you get the surprise of, oh my God, he's home, he's put this thing together. And they're talking and she starts asking him about, well, what's next? And he goes, what do you mean what's next? We're going to tour, we're going to make an album, and then we're going to tour on that again. And she's like, well, like forever? He goes, yeah, I mean, isn't this what you wanted? And you get the whole thing of the psychological ramifications between male and female. And then you start saying things you don't mean, that are mean, that you hold back when you're in love. And it was tough. I mean, you could just feel it palpably in that moment. And then what happens in the movie is they sort of break it off, and she goes on to be a great actress. He goes on to be a musician who ends up owning his own jazz club. And there's a final moment in the movie that is just amazing. It almost feels like the show Lost, like where I don't even want to explain it. It's good, but that scene at that dinner at the crossroads of their relationship, I could feel it. And you're like, even though it's fiction, you're just afraid of what's going to be said next. I mean, it's frightening. But yeah, I've been on a roll, so we're gonna go right into next week. I still have a bunch of these to see, to be honest. Hell or High Water, Arrival. There's another one I got to see, but we'll get there. It's been fun seeing this stuff. I love jamming this stuff in, and then you got your books and your magazines and your newspapers. It's hard to keep it all together, but there's worse things in the world than trying to keep media together. It's a good problem to have. So, folks, let's enjoy the Super Bowl. Everyone have a good time. Because most will be hearing this on the other side. That's why I tried to not keep it about today. It's all about the 2007 New York Giants Super Bowl championships, and how championships are just on a knife's edge. That's the amazing part, watching this thing 8-9 years later. Even watching it, I see where a million things could have gone wrong, where there was interceptions, where there was a fumble that's batted away. Oh, it's so hard to watch, because you feel like by watching the old thing that it's going to change, because it's just the uncertainty around games is just amazing. It's a flip of a coin. I'll talk to you later, guys. Matt McQueenie, Mixed Minus Podcast.